I stood there on the porch, keys still clutched in my hand, as the door clicked shut without hesitation. The freshly painted numbers on the house gleamed in the sun. My name was still on the mortgage, but it no longer felt like mine. From the upstairs window, laughter spilled out. My daughter's, mingled with his. "She does this every week," Mark said, like I was a stray begging for scraps. After giving her everything, I'd become an inconvenience. After 64 years, I was just noise to tune out. A problem to close the door on. Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The automatic doors of the Desert Sun Market sighed open, spilling a wave of desert heat into the over-air-conditioned store. Sandra Miller clutched her shopping list in one hand and adjusted her reading glasses with the other. The cart screeched as she maneuvered into the produce aisle, the scent of ripe peaches and cilantro wafting up to greet her. A baby cried somewhere in the next aisle. A man coughed behind her, and the intercom crackled with a half-hearted announcement about frozen pizzas on sale. She liked shopping early. Less noise, fewer people. But today, it was packed. Sandra moved slower than she used to, but she still had sharp eyes. She spotted the good lettuce, the kind that didn't look like it had spent a week in a truck, and leaned in, gently prying a bag free. Her cart was only half full. Eggs, whole wheat bread, coffee beans for Carla's drip machine. She'd get something sweet too. A little reward for surviving this heat wave. Her phone buzzed in her purse, which she'd tucked safely in the cart's child seat. She glanced down, reached for it, and stopped. Her purse was gone. She froze, her fingers suspended in air like a glitch in time. The red leather bag, the one Frank had bought her for their 30th anniversary, the one she always zipped, was gone. She scanned the cart. Nothing. Just a dent where it had rested seconds ago. "Oh no," she whispered, a sharp panic piercing her chest. She wheeled around, eyes darting through the crowd. A teenage girl in a hoodie walked briskly past. A man in paint-stained overalls brushed by her, muttering to himself. No one looked suspicious. But who did, really? She bolted down the cereal aisle, heart hammering in her chest. No sign. She pushed into the next row, breath shallow, eyes wide. She passed the dairy section, then the self-checkout, scanning every face, every movement. Nothing. By the time she stumbled outside, the sun was searing, the heat like a slap. Sandra shielded her eyes, scanning the parking lot. Dozens of cars, people loading groceries. An old man fumbling with his keys. A woman yelling into her phone. Her vision blurred with sweat. Or maybe tears. It was all in that purse. Her wallet. Her license. Credit cards. Medicare card. Cash. House key. Even the little photo of Lydia as a toddler wearing overalls and chocolate on her cheeks. Everything. Her hands shook as she fumbled for her phone in her jeans pocket. Thank God she kept it separate. She opened her contacts and tapped Lydia. Home. No answer. She hit Lydia. Cell. Straight to voicemail. Sandra stood there, a 64-year-old woman stranded under the unforgiving Phoenix sun, surrounded by strangers who didn't see her or didn't want to. Her throat tightened. She couldn't do this alone. She slid into her sun-baked Corolla, wincing as the seatbelt scalded her skin. The AC took too long to work. As she drove, the steering wheel slick with her palms, her thoughts churned. Maybe Lydia could help. Just a ride to the bank. Help making calls. Something. Anything. 15 minutes later, she pulled into the spotless cul-de-sac where Lydia lived. Wide streets, trimmed lawns, an HOA that fined for mismatched flower pots. Sandra had only been here twice. She always felt like a guest in a model home. She rang the bell. The chimes echoed deep inside. A moment later, the door opened. Lydia stood barefoot, in leggings and an oversized shirt that read, Coffee. Chaos. Repeat. Her eyebrows lifted. Sandra tried to speak, but her voice caught. Lydia, honey, I I need help. Lydia blinked, unimpressed. With what? My purse was stolen. Sandra managed, her voice trembly but low. At the store, everything's gone. For a second Lydia said nothing. Then, with an exasperated sigh, she folded her arms. Mom, seriously? I have meetings. Mark's working from home. I can't deal with this right now. I just need help calling the bank. Maybe a ride. Lydia's face hardened. Figure it out, old woman. The words didn't even register at first. They just sat there, suspended in the thick Arizona air. Sandra stared at her daughter's face. Familiar, yet so distant now, and something inside her quietly cracked. Lydia didn't flinch, didn't take it back. She turned and shut the door, just like that. Sandra stood on the porch for a long moment, her shadow stretching across the welcome mat that suddenly felt like a cruel joke. Somewhere inside, a dog barked. A laugh echoed from down the hall. Life went on. She walked slowly back to her car, opened the door, and sat motionless behind the wheel, her knuckles pale against the steering wheel. Then her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. One new charge. Sandra's eyes narrowed. The air shifted. Something colder than shock began to settle in her chest. This wasn't just a theft. Something else, something worse, was happening. Sandra didn't move. Not right away. She stood on Lydia's porch, the door still cooling from where it had slammed in her face. Her breath caught somewhere between her lungs and her throat. The sting wasn't just the words. It was how easily Lydia had said them. How practiced. The air shimmered around her in the late morning heat, the stucco walls of the house glowing too bright, too clean. She felt like a shadow against them. Forgotten. Disposable. Then came the sound. Light. Cruel. Through an open upstairs window. A laugh. Mark's. Oh, come on, he said, his voice drifting downward. You knew she was going to pull one of her helpless routines. Every week it's something. Sandra didn't hear Lydia's reply, but the laugh was enough. Her fingers twitched at her side. For one long, humbling moment she considered ringing the bell again. Maybe Lydia hadn't meant it. Maybe Mark was making it worse. Maybe if Sandra just explained what had been taken, the legal documents, the keys, the risk of someone walking into her home, maybe then her daughter would understand. But her feet wouldn't move forward. They turned her around. By the time she made it back to her neighborhood, the desert sun had shifted lower, casting long orange streaks across the sidewalk. Her Corolla rattled as it pulled into the driveway, the engine clicking like it, too, was tired of the day. Carla Jenkins was outside, watering the brittle patch of hydrangeas between their two homes. She straightened when she saw Sandra, eyebrows rising behind her oversized sunglasses. "Where the hell have you been?" she called. "I thought you were dead in a ditch." Sandra tried to force a smile, but it cracked. "Worse," she said softly. "I went to see Lydia." Carla shut off the hose immediately. "You look like you got hit by a truck," she said, stepping closer. "What happened?" Sandra didn't answer right away. She walked toward her front door with the slow, stiff steps of someone moving through water. Carla followed. Inside, the house was dim and quiet. The blinds were still drawn from earlier, keeping the worst of the heat out. Carla closed the door behind them and crossed her arms. "Well?" Sandra sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where she'd helped Lydia with science fair posters, and later, where Lydia had slammed her college acceptance letter down like a trophy. That table had known joy. Now it felt cold. "I told her what happened," Sandra said finally. "The purse, the cards, everything." Carla waited. "She told me to figure it out," Sandra whispered. "Called me an old woman." like I was a stray. Carla's nostrils flared. She said what? And Mark? Sandra rubbed her temples. He was laughing, like it was some big show. Carla looked ready to throw something. Instead, she marched to the fridge, yanked it open, and pulled out the emergency Coke she always left there for herself. She twisted off the cap with a pop. I always said he was a smug bastard. But I didn't think she'd... Carla shook her head. She didn't even ask if you were okay? Sandra stared down at the wood grain on the table, tracing it with her eyes. She didn't ask anything. I don't think she even looked at me, really. Carla took a long swig of the Coke. Jesus. Silence filled the room again, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the soft, distant buzz of a neighbor's lawnmower. Finally, Sandra spoke, her voice low, almost inaudible. She's not the girl I raised. Carla set the bottle down, softer this time. No, honey, she said. She isn't. But you didn't raise this version. Life did. Sandra nodded faintly, eyes misting again. But this time, she blinked the tears away before they could fall. I don't know what to do, she admitted. You do, Carla said. You always have. You're just not used to putting yourself first. Sandra looked at her friend, something flickering behind her tired eyes. Then her phone buzzed again. Another alert. Bank of Arizona. New account opened. Sandra Miller. Platinum Plus credit. Approved limit, $15,000. She stared at the screen. Carla, she said, voice suddenly sharp. I didn't open this. Carla leaned in, reading over her shoulder. Her face went pale. Sandra stood up, straighter than before. They're not just ignoring me, she said, her voice steady now. They're using me. The lobby of the Midtown Police Precinct smelled like industrial cleaner and tired coffee. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the air conditioning worked overtime to chase away the phoenix heat that clung to Sandra's skin. She sat on a cracked plastic bench, clutching her phone like it might vanish too. Her name was called. She stood slowly, joints aching more than they had yesterday. Or maybe it just felt that way. At the front desk, a uniformed officer waved her through a set of doors. Down a hallway, then left, and into a small glass-walled room that looked more like a doctor's office than a place where people came to report their lives being dismantled. Ma'am, came a voice, warm, male, mid-40s. Officer Daniels stood as she entered. His brown hair was graying at the temples, and his sleeves were rolled up, revealing a faded wedding band and sun-worn skin. He offered her a polite smile that didn't feel fake. Please, have a seat. Sandra sat down, folding her hands in her lap to hide the tremble. I understand your purse was stolen? She nodded. Yes, at the Desert Sun Market. I didn't even see it happen. Daniels clicked his pen and opened a notepad. He had the kind of face that absorbed stories without judgment. I'll need to take a full statement. We'll log the location, time, list the stolen items, and any identifying features. Sandra exhaled slowly. The purse was red leather. Old, but still nice. It was sentimental. She hesitated. My husband gave it to me. Years ago. Daniel softened. I'm sorry to hear that. She gave him the details. Where she left the purse in the cart. What was inside. He asked gently about witnesses, surveillance cameras, whether she noticed anyone following her. No, it was crowded. I just looked down, and it was gone. When he asked about fraudulent charges, she showed him her phone, the new account, the credit limit. Daniels frowned. That's more serious. This goes beyond purse snatching. Sandra folded her arms tightly, suddenly aware of how small she felt in the chair. I don't want to waste your time. You're not, he said firmly. This happens more than people think. Identity theft, elder targeting, it's a real problem. And you did the right thing coming in. But can you actually do anything? Daniels was quiet for a beat too long. Sometimes, yes. Not always. These cases can be hard to trace, especially if it's someone the victim knows. Sandra flinched. She hadn't said anything about Lydia yet. He noticed. I'm just saying it's common. Fraudsters use personal details, birthdays, addresses, things family members might know. Her throat tightened. She nodded, almost imperceptibly. He wrote for a while longer, then slid a few pamphlets across the table. Thick, colorless things with government logos and grim language. Steps to take, numbers to call. We'll log your report and start the process on our end, but your bank should be your next stop. Sandra rose, still clutching the pamphlets. Thank you. Daniel stood too. And Mrs. Miller? She turned. Don't let embarrassment stop you. Most people never even file a report. You're already ahead of the game. The lobby of Desert Community Bank was colder than the police station. Almost too cold. Like they were daring you to feel comfortable. The walls were cream-colored, spotless. A young woman at the front desk offered Sandra a tight, professional smile before paging Mr. Patel. He emerged moments later, dressed in a crisp white shirt with no tie, his sleeves pushed up, reading glasses in one hand. Sandra? He said kindly. She nodded, feeling the tightness return to her chest. Come with me. Let's sit down. His office smelled faintly of lemon wipes and printer ink. A framed photo of a beagle sat on his desk. He gestured to the chair across from him and folded his hands. Tell me everything, he said, from the beginning. She did. Again. He listened without interruption. When she got to the alert for the new credit card, his eyes narrowed. We'll sort this out, he said, standing abruptly and walking over to his monitor. I'm freezing everything tied to your name for now. That includes pending transfers, applications, and, yes, this new card. It's already been activated, which is fast. He tapped something, then glanced at her. Do you recognize this IP address? Sandra blinked. What's that? He rotated the monitor slightly. The screen showed login data, usernames, timestamps, IPs. This login was made this morning, less than an hour after the first charge. He zoomed in on the location. East Mesa, residential subnet. Sandra stared at the address. She knew it. She knew exactly where it was. Mr. Patel didn't ask. He watched her closely, then said quietly, I'll be here every step of the way. But if this was done by someone close to you, you may need more than just financial help. She didn't reply. Couldn't. Her ears were ringing, but something inside her, a flicker that had been nearly snuffed out, began to burn again. Not rage, not yet. Resolve. The next morning, the mailbox squealed when Sandra pulled it open. A single envelope lay inside, a thick cream-colored one, heavier than usual bills. No return address. Just her name, machine-printed and slightly smudged, like it had been processed in a rush. She turned it over in her hands as she walked up the driveway. Her sandals scraped the concrete. The heat was already building again. October or not, Phoenix didn't believe in seasons. Inside, Carla was at the kitchen table with her feet propped on the second chair, sipping coffee from a novelty mug shaped like a cactus. She looked up as Sandra closed the door behind her. Anything from the bank? Carla asked. Sandra shook her head. No, but this came. She slid the envelope onto the table. Carla leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Weird. No sender? Sandra peeled it open with careful fingers and pulled out a folded sheet of paper, an invoice, printed in gold-trimmed font at the top. Everton Jewelers. Scottsdale Fashion Square Luxury Goods Invoice. Final notice. Carla sat up straighter. What the hell is Everton? Sandra scanned the page. Her name was there. Her address. Her account. Except it wasn't hers. Rolex Datejust, Platinum, Custom Diamond Bezel, 14,872. Charge to card ending in 1399. Signature on file, Sandra Miller. She blinked, the words swimming slightly. Her throat went dry. I've never been to this store, she whispered. I don't even wear a watch. Frank used to have one, but... Carla snatched the invoice, studying it. This is someone using your name, she said, sharp now. Someone who thinks you won't check your mail. Sandra sat down slowly, pressing a hand to her temple. But how did they get the card already? Mr. Patel froze everything. This must have been before. Carla tapped the paper with a fingernail. Then it's our first breadcrumb. Sandra nodded, slowly pulling her phone from her pocket. Her hands didn't shake as much today. She found the number for Everton Jewelers at the bottom of the invoice and tapped to call. A chipper voice answered after 2 rings. Thank you for calling Everton Jewelers. This is Micah speaking. How may I help you? Yes, Sandra said, trying to steady her voice. I received a bill for a purchase I didn't make. I'd like to confirm some details. Absolutely, ma'am. What's the invoice number? She read it out. There was typing on the other end. Okay. I see it here. Rolex. Purchased 2 days ago. Billed to Sandra Miller. This number, actually. That wasn't me, she said firmly. I didn't authorize that charge. I don't even own that card. A pause. Then, I'm sorry to hear that. For fraud concerns, we usually forward you to our legal claims team, but I can give you some purchase info first. Please, Sandra said. Carla leaned closer, listening hard. The customer came in late afternoon, Micah said. Female, maybe mid-30s. Brown hair, shoulder length, designer handbag. She said she was shopping for a retirement gift for herself. Sandra's breath hitched. Did she show ID? Yep. Photo matched. We scanned it, and she signed. Can you describe the signature? A longer pause this time. Cursive, he said finally. Very neat. Big loop in the M of Miller. Looked practiced. Familiar. Carla's eyes locked with Sandra's. Neither of them blinked. Is there any chance? Sandra asked carefully. You could email me a scan of that signature? For legal purposes? Micah hesitated. Technically, we're not supposed to, but since it's flagged as fraud, I can send it to the email on file. That won't help, she said quickly. Please send it to this one instead. She gave him her private address, the one she never shared with Lydia. Done, he said. You should get it in a few minutes. And ma'am? Yes? You sound like you're going through something. I hope you figure it out. The line went dead. A minute later, her phone chimed. New email. She opened the attachment. The image was grainy but clear. A purchase form, initialed and signed. Sandra stared at the signature, and her stomach dropped. She'd seen it hundreds of times before. On permission slips, report cards, birthday cards signed in a rush. The soft curve of the L, the slightly overdone dot on the I. Lydia. It was her daughter's handwriting. Sandra drove to Lydia's house with the invoice folded in her handbag like contraband. The edges had already gone soft from the way she'd been gripping it. Phoenix sun poured through the windshield, bleaching the world to a harsh white. She didn't bother calling ahead. She didn't trust her voice not to give her away. The cul-de-sac looked as spotless as ever. Perfect lawns, no trash cans in sight. Lydia's SUV gleamed in the driveway. A splash of water from the pool glittered behind the privacy fence. Nothing about the place looked stolen. And yet, it all did. Sandra parked at the curb and sat for a moment, gripping the wheel until the leather creaked. The air inside the car was stifling. Her pulse thudded in her ears. She thought of Frank's watch, of permission slips signed in neat loops, of the girl who used to hold her hand crossing the street. She thought of the Rolex on the invoice. She thought of the retirement gift for herself. Then she shut the car door and walked up the path. The front door opened before she could ring. Lydia stood there, hair damp from a shower, phone in one hand. Mark's voice floated from the living room where a sports channel blared. "Mom," Lydia said flatly. "Again?" Sandra held up the invoice. "We need to talk." Lydia rolled her eyes and stepped aside. "Make it quick. Mark's on a call." Inside smelled faintly of chlorine and expensive candles. Sandra stood near the kitchen island while Lydia scrolled her phone, one hip cocked, her wedding ring flashing. "This," Sandra said, unfolding the paper, "is a bill from a jewelry store, nearly $15,000, in my name." Lydia barely glanced at it. "So?" "So," Sandra said, her voice rising, "you used my name, my credit, my ID. I have the signature." Lydia actually smiled then, a small, dismissive curve of her lips. "You'll survive." Mark emerged from the living room, earbuds dangling around his neck. He smirked when he saw the invoice. "Is this about that watch? Lydia told me you'd freak out." Sandra stared at him. "You knew?" Mark shrugged. "What's the big deal? You weren't using the credit anyway. It's just paperwork." Sandra's throat went dry. She had imagined tears, excuses, maybe even denial. But not this. Not the easy arrogance. "You stole from me," she whispered, her voice shaking now. "You stole from your own mother." Lydia dropped her phone onto the counter with a soft clack. She looked at Sandra, eyes cool as glass. "What's yours is mine. Isn't that what you always said when I was a kid?" Sandra blinked at her. "That's not what it meant." Lydia tilted her head, almost playful. "Relax. We'll pay it off. Eventually." Mark snorted. "Don't make threats, babe. She's not gonna do anything. She hates conflict." Something broke inside Sandra then. Not loudly, not dramatically. More like a seam tearing in fabric. The soundless kind of break that doesn't mend. She folded the invoice neatly, sliding it back into her bag. Her hands no longer shook. She thought of Officer Daniels, of Mr. Patel, of Carla's fierce eyes. She thought of the life she'd built, of the woman she used to be before grief and years made her soft. "You're right," she said quietly. Lydia blinked. "About what?" Sandra met her daughter's gaze squarely. "About me hating conflict." For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Then she turned and walked out. She heard Lydia's voice behind her, light with laughter. "Oh, come on, Mom. Don't be dramatic." And Mark's muttered echo. "Yeah, drama." Sandra didn't look back. She walked down the path, the Arizona sun falling hot on her shoulders. But this time, it didn't feel heavy. It felt like a forge. By the time she reached her car, her face was calm, her breathing steady. She slid behind the wheel, shut the door, and stared at her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her eyes were different. Clearer. "This ends with me," she whispered. Then she started the engine. The next morning, Sandra showed up at Desert Community Bank 5 minutes before it opened. She waited in the parking lot with the engine off, watching her reflection in the glass doors, arms crossed tightly over her chest. She hadn't slept. Not really. Her mind had replayed Lydia's smirk, Mark's laugh, and the echo of "you'll survive" like a needle stuck in vinyl. At 8 a.m. sharp, the doors unlocked. Mr. Patel appeared in the lobby with 2 coffees in hand. "I had a feeling you'd come back," he said gently, offering one to her. "Let's get to work." They sat in his office as the bank began to hum around them, phones ringing, printers starting, keys tapping. Sandra set her handbag on the desk and opened her notepad. "I want to know everything tied to my name," she said. "Every account, every charge, every shadow." Mr. Patel nodded once. "I ran a credit scan after you left. It's worse than we thought." He pulled up her report on the monitor and turned the screen toward her. 6 credit cards, 2 online loan applications, a retail account with a department store Sandra hadn't stepped foot in since the Bush administration. She scanned the list, bile rising in her throat. How long has this been going on? Looks like it started about 3 months ago. The first charge was small, a test run probably. Sandra's hands tightened in her lap. That's when she stopped returning my calls. Right after my birthday. Mr. Patel glanced at her. You're still within the window to report all of this. We'll file fraud claims with each agency and freeze the others. But you need to understand. This isn't just bad judgment. It's criminal. I do understand, Sandra said quietly. But she didn't move. By the time she got home, the air outside felt heavier, like it knew what she was about to do. Carla was in the backyard pulling weeds with gardening gloves and a straw hat that looked like it belonged in a catalog. When she spotted Sandra through the fence slats, she stood up. Well? She asked, wiping sweat from her brow. Did Patel find anything? Sandra stepped through the gate. 6 cards, a store account, and 2 online loans. Carla stared. She's draining you. Sandra nodded. And you're going to the police? I don't know. Carla's hands went to her hips. Sandra. She's my daughter. She's a thief. Sandra didn't answer. Carla pulled off her gloves and pointed them like a warning. You said it yourself. This ends with you. Not with another quiet apology. Not with hoping she magically learns empathy. With you. I know, Sandra whispered. That afternoon she returned to the police precinct. Officer Daniels was in the same room as before, this time with a folder already open in front of him. I heard from the bank, he said. Looks like we've got enough to formally escalate this. Sandra sat down, her heart beating like it was too big for her chest. She reached into her bag and pulled out the printouts Mr. Patel had given her. One by one she laid them on the table. Daniels examined them, his brows pulling tighter. Did you get a signature from the store? I did, Sandra said. It's hers. He didn't ask who hers meant. Not this time. All right, he said, flipping to a new form. We can file this as financial exploitation and identity theft. Both fall under state felony statutes. You'll need to sign a formal complaint. It will move things forward, slowly. But it's the first real step. Sandra stared at the paper. The words blurred for a second. She thought of Lydia's first steps, of packing school lunches, of whispered bedtime songs. She thought of how those memories didn't change what had happened. Daniels handed her a pen. Family or not, he said, it's still theft. Sandra took the pen. Her hand hovered, then pressed. She signed. She left the station quietly, the door closing behind her with a soft metallic click. Outside, the wind had picked up, swirling warm dust along the sidewalk. The sun was still high. She could feel it on her skin, but she didn't flinch. As she walked toward her car, her phone buzzed again. New application filed. Auto loan. $28,000. Status. Pending. Sandra stopped cold. She hadn't even sat down yet. The ink on the complaint was still wet. And Lydia was already making her next move. By the end of the week, Sandra could feel it. The way people started to look at her. Not directly. Not confrontationally. But in that sideways, second-glance kind of way that meant they knew something. Or thought they did. The first whisper came from across the hedge while she watered her aloe plants. Did you hear about Lydia? 2 neighbors, Anne and June, on their morning walk, voices low but sharp. Sandra didn't look up. Just turned the hose slightly to the left, letting the stream hit the gravel. She stole from her own mother, one said, scandal barely disguised as concern. No, the other gasped. I heard Sandra's the one who's losing it. Sandra clenched the hose tighter. Her aloe bent beneath the water. At the community center that Tuesday, the whispers followed her like perfume. She'd been volunteering there for almost a year, helping organize food drives, signing in seniors for blood pressure screenings, setting up chairs for bingo night. Normally, she blended into the flow, but now people paused when she entered a room. Conversations hiccuped. Smiles grew just a little too polite. That afternoon, she overheard two women near the coffee station. It's sad, really. I heard she accused her daughter of fraud. Facebook says otherwise. Lydia posted something about elder paranoia. Sounded serious. Sandra didn't flinch. She just poured herself a cup of decaf and stirred it slowly, listening. That night, she found the post. Lydia had tagged it as public. It's heartbreaking when you watch a parent decline mentally. One minute they're okay, the next they're accusing their own family of stealing. Please check in on your aging loved ones. Memory loss is real and painful. Dire dementia awareness. Jakash family first. Hundreds of likes, comments of support. People Sandra didn't know telling Lydia she was so strong that they were sending prayers. Her throat went tight. She almost commented. Almost typed out, "You lied. You used me. You forged my name." But she didn't. Instead, she logged out, closed the laptop, and sat in the dark for a long time. "I should say something," she said to Carla the next morning. They were in the kitchen, drinking coffee. Carla was icing her knee from a gardening mishap and had a half-eaten granola bar in one hand. "Nope," Carla said flatly. "She's calling me senile, online, to strangers." Carla shrugged. "Let her. Silence cuts sharper than shouting. You make a scene, you feed her version. Stay steady. Let the truth grow legs." Sandra looked down at her coffee. "But it's humiliating." "Only if you let it be." There was a pause. Then Carla added with a wink. "Besides, you volunteering at the center while she's throwing tantrums online? That's the long game." And it was. Over the next few weeks, Sandra showed up early to every shift at the community center. She helped Mrs. Goodman fill pantry bags. She donated spare canned goods. She stayed late to stack chairs and sweep floors. She didn't gossip. She didn't complain. But people noticed. They came up quietly, familiar faces she hadn't seen in a while. One woman stopped her near the bulletin board. "Sandra, if you ever need help with anything, just ask. Some of us still remember who raised the carpool and baked cookies for fundraisers." Another leaned in near the coffee urn. "I don't believe a word of what she's posting." And eventually, even the whisperers softened. Her silence had become armor. Her consistency, a weapon. One evening, after the Tuesday night senior card group wrapped up, Mr. Ellis, who usually kept to himself, handed her a folded slip of paper as he left. "Just in case," he said. It was a name, a contact, a retired forensic accountant who now volunteered pro bono for financial elder abuse cases. Sandra stared at it for a moment. Then she tucked it into her wallet. Later that night, she stood on her porch under the wide Phoenix sky. The moon hung low and orange. In the distance, wind chimes rang from someone's backyard. Carla joined her with 2 glasses of iced tea. "Well," she said, raising hers like a toast, "you've got your own army now." Sandra didn't smile, but her eyes held something deeper than gratitude: readiness. The envelope was thick, government sealed, and shoved deep in the middle of her mail pile, wedged between a Meals on Wheels flyer and a coupon for gutter cleaning. But Sandra saw the state seal through the plastic address window and felt her stomach drop. Inside, the document was printed on stiff bleached paper. Superior Court of Maricopa County. Case number: CR 247819, Sandra Miller versus Lydia Miller. Charges: financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. Identity theft. Felony grade: Class 3. Her name, her daughter's name, facing each other like enemies in print. Sandra stood at the kitchen counter, reading every line twice while the clock ticked above the sink. She had known this was coming. The complaint was signed after all, but seeing it laid out in legal typeface, stripped of family and loaded with weight, it knocked the air right out of her. She sat down hard, the court date circled in bold. December 14th. 2 weeks. Carla arrived minutes later with a pie she didn't bake and a glare that could cut sheet metal. "Let me guess," she said, holding up the envelope. "It's official." Sandra nodded. Carla pulled out her phone. "Then we start preparing." Later that day, Lydia called. The number was still saved in Sandra's phone, though the ringtone had been changed to a sharp, neutral buzz. Sandra stared at the screen for a long time before answering. "What?" she said flatly. "I hope you're proud of yourself," Lydia snapped. No greeting, no pause. Sandra closed her eyes, held the phone away for a beat, then brought it back. "You're being charged. Not attacked. Charged. Because you committed crimes." Mark's voice rang out in the background. He was close enough to be heard clearly. "She's delusional. This is elder abuse in reverse. You're destroying your own family." Sandra stayed quiet. "You don't even know what you're doing," Lydia continued. "You've lost it, Mom. You need help." "I do know what I'm doing," Sandra said calmly, "and I'm finally doing it." Before Lydia could respond, she ended the call. That night, Sandra sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad, her reading glasses, and 3 manila folders Mr. Patel had couriered over. Account statements, credit pulls, screenshots, scans of her signature next to Lydia's forgery. The entire table looked like a crime scene. Across from her, Carla pored over a spreadsheet and took notes in all caps. "I swear," Carla muttered, flipping pages, "this whole mess is like a Lifetime movie." "Worse," Sandra said. "At least Lifetime scripts don't get this personal." But her voice didn't shake. Not anymore. She reviewed every item with quiet precision. The court might not care how much of it hurt, but she knew the truth was all that mattered now. And then she saw it. A line buried in a mortgage document, different from the rest. Joint co-signer, Sandra Miller Property, 1417 W Stone Ridge Drive, Phoenix, AZ 85045. She blinked. That was Lydia and Mark's address. She flipped through the attachments, a digital signature on the co-purchase agreement. Her name listed as guarantor. It had been used, months ago, when they refinanced the house. She hadn't signed anything, not a damn thing. "Carla," she whispered, tapping the document. "She didn't just open credit cards. She used my name to buy their house." Carla squinted at the page. "Wait, you're listed as co-owner. Technically." "No," Sandra said, her breath catching. "I'm listed as co-signer and financial contributor. That means—" Carla interrupted, eyes going wide. "You didn't just loan them money they stole. Legally, part of that house is yours." Sandra stared at the paper, stunned. It wasn't just fraud, it was property. She owned a piece of the very home where her daughter had slammed the door in her face. A new kind of fire lit behind her ribs. Cold, clear, strategic. "This changes everything," she said softly. The courtroom was smaller than Sandra expected. Not the grand, echoing chamber you saw on TV, just a narrow rectangle with pale wood benches and a faint smell of old carpet and sanitizer. The walls were beige. Everything was beige, except for Lydia. She walked in first, heels clicking like punctuation across the floor, head high, sunglasses still perched on her head like a crown. Her fitted blazer was too crisp for someone on trial, and the gold necklace catching the fluorescent lights wasn't subtle. Mark trailed behind her in a tailored jacket he probably hadn't paid for, jaw tight, eyes narrowed like this was a boardroom presentation and not a criminal hearing. Sandra watched them from a bench in the back. She hadn't entered yet, waiting quietly, out of view, the way she always used to wait at dance recitals or school plays. Only this time, there was no applause coming. Lydia glanced around, annoyed. She's not even here. She'll come, Mark muttered. She wants the performance. They didn't see the courtroom door open at the side. They didn't see Sandra step inside. She wore no makeup. A dark green blouse with sleeves to the wrist. Her gray hair was tied back in a low bun. No jewelry except for her wedding ring. She walked slowly but with certainty, a simple leather portfolio clutched in both hands. She didn't look at them as she took her seat, but Lydia looked and frowned. When the judge entered, Honorable Jane Albright, 60-ish, sharp-eyed, everyone stood. Then it began. Lydia's lawyer, a sleek man with teeth too white for Arizona, stood quickly. Your Honor, we maintain this case is based on confusion and deteriorating memory. Ms. Miller has no direct evidence that the purchases or applications were unauthorized. In fact, the documents suggest a pattern of voluntary assistance to her daughter, consistent with elder generosity, not exploitation. Sandra said nothing, just stared down at her papers. The lawyer continued. We'd also like to submit a psychological affidavit regarding Sandra's. No, the judge said, cutting him off. We're not turning this into a competency hearing unless you're filing one. Are you? The lawyer hesitated. No, Your Honor. Then we'll proceed on the merits. Sandra stood slowly when it was her turn. Carla was seated behind her, arms crossed, radiating moral support like heat from a radiator. I have documentation, Sandra said simply, unfolding the portfolio. Bank statements, credit reports, charges made in my name, forged signatures, and a co-signed mortgage agreement I never saw, let alone approved. She handed them to the bailiff, who passed them to the judge. Lydia crossed her arms, lips tight. The judge began flipping through the pages. The silence in the courtroom was palpable. Pages turning, pens scribbling, the subtle rustle of paper as truth landed with weight. Sandra waited. The judge murmured as she held up one of the mortgage documents. Digital signature, same timestamp as a retail charge placed across town. Sandra, where were you on June 3rd? With Mr. Wiko, Patel at Desert Community Bank, she said. He notarized something for my HOA records that day. I have a copy of that too. She handed over a separate sheet, a notarized document with Patel's stamp. The judge nodded. Lydia's foot tapped under the table. Miss Miller, the judge said, now turning to her. Do you dispute that this is your mother's name on the co-signed loan for your property? Lydia's lawyer stood again. Your Honor, I asked your client. Lydia hesitated for the first time. Mark leaned over, whispering something that made her flinch. Then Lydia straightened in her chair and muttered. She offered to help. She just doesn't remember. The judge raised an eyebrow. And yet, she provided notarized proof she was elsewhere when this signature was captured. Are you saying she has the ability to time travel, Miss Miller? Lydia's face flushed, but she said nothing. The judge turned back to Sandra. Anything else, Mrs. Miller? Sandra nodded once. Only that I trusted her. And she used that trust to rewrite my name into her debt. Carla murmured. Damn right. The judge closed the file and sat back. This case, she said, has enough merit to proceed to full trial. Charges stand. We'll reconvene for sentencing arguments. Lydia's mouth opened like she might protest, but no sound came. Sandra looked at her daughter for the first time all morning. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply met her eyes, and Lydia looked away. It was raining the morning of the verdict. A rare thing in Phoenix. Soft, steady rain tapping against the courthouse windows like a reminder that even this place could be washed clean. Sandra sat near the front, hands folded in her lap, her breathing even. Her green blouse was replaced with a dark navy one today. No jewelry, no handbag, just a single manila folder tucked beneath her arm in case the court needed one last thing. Behind her, Carla sat with her ever-present iced coffee and that look she reserved for anyone foolish enough to mess with her people. 2 rows back, a couple of older women from the community center sat silently, their eyes fixed on the bench like it was a church pew. Across the aisle, Lydia fiddled with her phone until the bailiff barked at her to put it away. Her nails were chipped, her heels scuffed. The blazer from the first hearing had been traded for a loose cardigan, one shoulder slipping off. Mark sat beside her, arms crossed, jaw tight. The courtroom felt smaller than ever. The judge entered. "All rise." Everyone stood. Sandra didn't waver. Honorable Jane Albright took her seat and adjusted her glasses. The file in front of her was thick. Sandra had filled most of it. Case number CR 247819, the judge began. Sandra Miller versus Lydia Miller. Charges: financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, identity theft, mortgage fraud, and unauthorized use of personal identification. Sandra's ears rang, but she heard every word. "I have reviewed all submitted documents, verified with financial institutions, reviewed sworn affidavits, and examined digital forensics provided by the bank and state. After careful consideration," she paused, "I find the defendant, Lydia Miller, guilty on all counts." A quiet gasp broke from someone in the back. Carla let out a breath like she'd been holding it for days. Lydia didn't move. "In addition to criminal penalties," the judge continued, "the defendant is ordered to pay restitution in the full amount of damages, $83,547, to Sandra Miller. Effective immediately, all co-signed property shall be frozen and subjected to legal review, pending civil partition. That includes the residence at 1417 W Stone Ridge Drive." Mark sat forward like someone had slapped him. Lydia finally spoke. "You can't be serious," she snapped, shooting to her feet. "That house is mine." The judge didn't even blink. "According to the documents you submitted, your mother is a co-financial signer. Her claim is legally valid." "You ruined me!" Lydia screamed, whipping toward Sandra. Her voice cracked at the edges, wild with disbelief. "You've taken everything from me." Sandra stood, slowly, her eyes calm and clear. She didn't raise her voice. "You did that yourself." Lydia stared at her, stunned into silence. Then came the sound of a chair screeching back across the floor. Mark stood up, jaw clenched. "This is insane," he muttered. "I told you this would backfire." Lydia turned to him. "Mark, don't—" But he was already walking out, shaking his head. "Don't call me," he said over his shoulder. "Figure it out, Lydia." The same words Lydia had thrown at Sandra that first day. Only now, they hit like a brick. The courtroom door slammed behind him. Silence fell like dust. The judge looked at Sandra. "You'll receive official documentation within the week. We're adjourned." The gavel struck once. Sandra remained standing as everyone shuffled to their feet. Carla came to her side, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "You all right?" she whispered. Sandra nodded once, slowly. "I'm still standing," she said. "That's more than they expected." Lydia dropped back into her seat like the air had left her body. And Sandra? She walked out of that courtroom tall, not triumphant, not smug, but solid, whole. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the air still smelled like something had been cleaned. The first foreclosure notice arrived at Lydia's house 2 weeks after the verdict. Sandra didn't see it herself. She heard it from Carla, who heard it from the HOA secretary, who heard it from the woman who walked her schnauzer past Stone Ridge Drive every morning. The envelope was bright red, unmistakable. It had sat in the mailbox for 3 days before Lydia finally came outside to snatch it. She hadn't been seen since. Neighbors who once sipped sangria in Lydia's backyard or tagged her in wine mom memes had gone quiet. Unfriended her, avoided eye contact. One woman, Tanya something, went as far as to write "Don't involve me" in a comment thread, and then immediately deleted it. Lydia's social media, once a curated feed of pool selfies and charcuterie boards, was now a graveyard. No new posts, no apologies, just silence. And silence, in suburban Phoenix, was as loud as a bullhorn. Sandra didn't gloat. She watched the ripples with a strange ache in her chest, like bruises surfacing after a blow you didn't realize had landed. She'd won. The law had spoken. The money was being returned, the accounts untangled, the property under review. But grief still sat quietly with her at the kitchen table. "She's still your daughter," Carla said one afternoon, reading her expression like a barometer. "I get it." Sandra nodded. "I don't regret pressing charges. But I don't feel proud either." "Good," Carla said, dunking a biscotti in her coffee. "That means you're human." Sandra smiled faintly but didn't speak. "And you're not going to call her?" "I wasn't going to." "I know that tone. That, maybe I'll just see how she's doing tone. Don't let guilt drag you back into her mess." "I'm not." "Then good," Carla said, brushing crumbs off her lap. "Because guilt doesn't mean you did something wrong. It just means you cared more than they did." At the bank, Mr. Patel walked her through every restitution deposit and investment option with quiet focus. "This won't undo what happened," he said, adjusting his glasses. "But it can give you choice again. That matters." Sandra nodded. "I don't want anything flashy, just clean." He smiled. "Let's start with clean." By the time she left his office, she had a modest portfolio in her name, a new checking account, and a dedicated fraud lock on every point of access. More importantly, she had peace of mind, something Lydia hadn't been able to forge. Sandra began making lists again, not of groceries or medication reminders, but possibilities. A trip to Flagstaff, maybe a pottery class, a new coffee table, something modern with clean lines and no history. One morning, she even caught herself looking at real estate listings downtown. She folded the brochure away before Carla could see, but not before allowing herself to imagine it. A condo with a view, elevator access, fresh walls, no shadows. The Phoenix sunsets had started to feel different, less heavy, less like the end of something, and more like an exhale. The sky had begun to bloom in golds and pinks again instead of sinking into gray. One night she stood on her back patio, watering the plants she had nearly let die last summer. The hose twisted at her feet. A soft wind stirred the trees. The light on the horizon dipped slow like it had nowhere else to be. She didn't cry. She didn't think about Lydia. She just watched the sun go down and let herself feel proud. For surviving. For refusing to disappear. For becoming something other than bitter. Then her phone buzzed on the patio railing. Blocked caller. Voicemail received. She didn't answer. Didn't open it. But she stood there, staring at the notification for a long time, her expression unreadable. The condo wasn't big. One bedroom, 1.5 bath, third floor of a modest complex near Roosevelt Row with stucco walls and a humming elevator that groaned like an old man's knees. But it was hers. Sandra stood in the middle of the empty living room, sunlight slanting through the tall windows, hitting the bare hardwood floors. She took a slow breath. The place smelled like fresh paint and new beginnings. No ghosts. No arguments baked into the walls. No memories with jagged edges. Carla was the first to step in behind her, carrying a vase of sunflowers already half wilting in the heat. "Well," she said, looking around, "it's no palace." Sandra smiled. "Exactly." Carla set the vase on the kitchen counter and pulled out a bottle of sparkling cider from her tote. "You didn't think I'd let you get away without a toast, did you? I haven't even moved the boxes in yet. You've got a floor and a fridge. That's enough." They poured, clinked glasses, and drank. Carla surveyed the room with approval. "Looks more like you already," she said. "Simple, peaceful, stubborn in all the right ways." Sandra laughed, the sound catching her by surprise. Later that afternoon, she unpacked one box at a time, starting with the things Lydia had once called dated. The cherrywood framed photo of her wedding day, the faded quilt her mother made in 1962, the chipped ceramic angel that used to sit by the fireplace in the old house. All of them now found a home on clean, uncluttered shelves. The condo took shape not as a fresh start, but as a reclamation. Not shiny and new, but honest. Lived in. Loved. 2 weeks later, the dining table, barely big enough for four, was crowded with 7 folding chairs, mismatched plates, and a countertop full of potluck dishes brought by her crew from the community center. Carla made her chili. Mr. Ellis brought a bundt cake that leaned a little too far to one side. Someone else brought a box of wine they pretended not to be proud of. Sandra stood at the sink, drying her hands as the sound of easy laughter filled the space. Her laughter. Other people's laughter. Unforced and unguarded. It had been years since her home felt full in a way that wasn't tied to obligation or family drama. This was different. No one expected anything from her tonight. They were here because they wanted to be. She watched them joke and pass plates and argue over what counted as a vegetable. Then she glanced at the window, the city skyline glowing in the twilight beyond the patio glass, and let herself believe it was possible to start again, to build a life out of truth instead of damage control. Carla sidled up beside her, nursing a glass of cider. "You okay?" she asked. Sandra nodded slowly. "Yeah. For the first time in a long time, I think I am." They clinked glasses again, and Carla headed back to the table, offering unsolicited advice on how to reheat lasagna without ruining it. Sandra stayed behind for a beat longer, taking it all in. The warm lighting, the chipped casserole dishes, the dent in the drywall from where she'd dropped the tape measure her first day moving in. The room pulsed with something rare. Not joy, exactly. Something quieter. Something earned. Wholeness. She stepped out onto the small balcony to catch the last of the sunset. Phoenix glowing amber and rose, the buildings lit like a constellation of second chances. She closed her eyes and breathed in deep. Then, 3 sharp knocks at the door. She turned. The room quieted. Carla looked toward the hallway, brows lifting. Sandra crossed the floor slowly. Her hand hovered over the knob. She opened it. Lydia. Shoeless. Hair tangled. Clothes loose like she'd shrunk inside them. Her eyes were rimmed red, her lips dry, hands clutched around a torn grocery bag. She looked up at her mother with a face that no longer knew how to pretend. "I have nowhere else to go," Lydia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please." The silence behind Sandra stretched long. Everyone inside waited. Sandra didn't move, didn't speak. She just stood in the doorway. The weight of every choice pressing down on her shoulders, the night air curling between them like a ghost. Sandra didn't move. She stood in the open doorway of her condo as laughter faded behind her, and night air crept between her and the broken figure on the threshold. Lydia. Her daughter. Barefoot, face drawn and blotchy, makeup streaked from crying or maybe days of not washing it off. Her hands gripped a plastic grocery bag so tightly the handles had nearly torn through. Inside, a hoodie, a phone charger, a crumpled water bottle, the remains of a life unraveling. Sandra had imagined this moment before, not with satisfaction, but with curiosity. If it would ever come, if Lydia would ever look back. And now it had arrived. Quiet, shaking, unplanned. "Mom," Lydia croaked, voice raw and unfamiliar. "I have nothing left." She clutched the doorframe with one hand like she might fall forward otherwise. Please. Behind Sandra, the room had gone silent. Carla stood near the counter, wine glass paused midair, her posture rigid, eyes narrowed. Everyone else stayed seated, polite enough, or uncomfortable enough, not to interfere. Sandra took a slow breath, then she stepped aside. "Come in," she said, her voice quiet. "To talk." Lydia hesitated, just for a second, then crossed the threshold like a gust of wind could blow her back out again. She didn't make it far. By the time she reached the middle of the living room, her knees buckled. The bag dropped to the floor. She crumpled onto the rug, hands covering her face, and sobbed. Deep, guttural, childlike sobs that shattered whatever brittle pride she had left. Sandra stood still. Not rushing to her, not touching her, just watching. Carla didn't hide her skepticism. She walked slowly toward the hallway, pausing beside Sandra. "You sure?" she whispered. "Just to talk," Sandra replied. Carla nodded once, then turned to the others. "Let's give them space," she said, ushering guests toward the front door. There were quiet nods, murmurs of support, someone patting Sandra's shoulder as they passed. In less than 2 minutes, the laughter and warmth that had filled the condo faded into the hallway, replaced by the soft slam of the door behind them. Now it was just the two of them, and the silence. Sandra didn't speak. She let Lydia cry, not because she needed to hear it, but because Lydia needed to feel it. Eventually, the sobs slowed. Lydia wiped her face with the cuff of her sweater, still curled like a child at her feet. "I don't have anywhere else," she whispered, her voice ragged. "Mark left. The house is gone. My cards are dead. I've been sleeping in my car. I'm not even sure it'll start again." Sandra walked slowly to the armchair by the window and sat. Not out of coldness, but because it felt important that she not be on her knees this time. Lydia looked up at her. "I messed up," she said. Sandra studied her. The swollen eyes, the torn seams on her hoodie, the way she looked older now, the entitlement burned off by consequence. There were no excuses in her tone, no spin, just collapse. "I can't fix any of it," Lydia went on, her voice barely holding shape. "But I don't know what else to do. I don't want money. I swear. I can't keep waking up scared. I just need a place to land. Just for a little while." The request wasn't spoken. It didn't have to be. Sandra didn't answer right away. She looked around her condo, the books on the shelf, the soft throw folded on the armrest, the sunflower vase Carla had brought still blooming in the window. Everything here had been rebuilt, carefully, intentionally. Not around absence, but around truth. And now that truth had a heartbeat and tear-streaked cheeks, kneeling on her rug. Sandra exhaled. "You can stay tonight," she said, her voice steady. "One night." Lydia's head dropped again, this time in relief. "Thank you." "I said one night." Lydia nodded. Sandra rose and walked into the kitchen. She opened a cabinet, pulled out a blanket, and set it gently on the couch. "I'm not saving you," she said, "but I'm not throwing you away either." Lydia curled up, the blanket clutched like a lifeline. Sandra stood over her for a long moment, then turned off the living room light. And as she walked toward her bedroom, her phone buzzed on the counter. Another voicemail. Blocked caller. She stared at it, the number matching the one from the night before. But she didn't open it. Not yet. Morning came slowly, gray light spilling through the blinds and pooling on the hardwood like quiet water. Sandra sat at her small kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug gone lukewarm. The condo was still except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the faint sound of traffic 3 stories below. On the couch, Lydia stirred under the blanket Sandra had left her. For a moment she looked like she had when she was small, hair in her eyes, face soft, curled into herself. Then she sat up, blinking as though she'd woken in a stranger's home, which, in a way, she had. Sandra didn't speak. She sipped her coffee and waited. Lydia rubbed her eyes, then stood and shuffled toward the kitchen. Bare feet on wood, head down. She stopped at the edge of the table. "I thought you were weak," she said. Her voice was rough, but it wasn't defiant. More like confession than insult. Sandra set the mug down carefully. "Kindness isn't weakness," she said. "Cruelty is." Lydia's lips trembled. She sank into the chair across from her mother, staring at her hands. "I don't even know how it got this far," Lydia whispered. I thought you'd never fight back. That you'd just let me keep taking. I told myself it was fair because you're my mom. Because you're supposed to save me no matter what I do." Her voice cracked. "I hate who I became." Sandra stayed still, her face unreadable. "I'm sorry," Lydia said finally. "I'm so sorry. For the cards, the house, the posts online, all of it. I was angry and selfish and—" She swallowed. "Please, I don't want you to hate me." Sandra's eyes softened, but only slightly. "I don't hate you, Lydia," she said. "I never did." Lydia's shoulders sagged. A single tear slid down her cheek. "But I can't excuse you either," Sandra continued. Her voice wasn't sharp, but it was steady. "You stole from me, but worse, you threw me away." Lydia flinched, like the words had landed physically. She lowered her head, hands clasped tight in her lap. "I know," she whispered. Sandra let the silence sit between them. She'd learned silence was more powerful than yelling. It made room for the truth to breathe. Finally, she said, "If you want to rebuild something, it starts with honesty. Not guilt, not begging. Honesty. That's all I'll accept." Lydia nodded, still looking at her hands. "I don't know how." "You'll figure it out," Sandra said. "But not here. Not by moving back in. Not by pretending nothing happened. This is my home, Lydia. It's where I healed. It's not a hiding place for you." Lydia's head snapped up, desperation flickering in her eyes. "Then what do I do?" Sandra met her gaze evenly. "You get help. Real help. A job. Counseling. You learn what responsibility feels like. You start small, and you stop expecting me to fix it." Lydia looked at her for a long time, tears dripping off her chin. Then she whispered, "I don't deserve you." Sandra reached for her mug again but didn't drink. "That's not the point," she said quietly. "You deserve to become better. That's on you." Lydia's shoulders hunched. She nodded once, a small, jerky motion. Sandra rose from the table and walked to the balcony door, looking out at the pale morning skyline. She didn't turn around when she said, "You can stay until tomorrow. After that, you need a plan." Behind her, Lydia's voice was small. "Okay." Sandra closed her eyes. The city outside was waking, horns blaring, light catching on glass towers. Her own heartbeat felt steady. For the first time, she realized she wasn't afraid of losing Lydia anymore. She was afraid of losing herself. Her phone buzzed on the counter again. Same blocked number. Another voicemail. She reached for it, thumb hovering over the screen, then glanced back at Lydia sitting at the table, head bowed. What she saw in her daughter's eyes this time wasn't entitlement. It was a plea. But from whom was the voicemail? Sandra woke before the sun. The condo was still, wrapped in that soft pre-dawn silence that made the world feel like it was holding its breath. She slipped out of bed, pulled her cardigan from the chair, and padded barefoot into the kitchen. The floor was cool under her feet. She didn't look toward the couch right away. The coffee maker sputtered to life, filling the room with its gentle hiss and the smell of something warm and earthy. She poured a cup, held it with both hands, and walked to the wide living room window. Outside, Phoenix was just beginning to bloom. The city skyline glimmered in blue and gold as the sun crept up from behind the mountains. Rooftops shimmered with dew, birds traced invisible arcs between buildings, and cars hummed softly down the streets below. Early workers, late-night wanderers, people beginning or ending things. Sandra took a slow sip. Behind her, Lydia shifted on the couch. The rustle of a blanket. A faint cough. Then stillness again. Sandra didn't turn around. She let the moment stay intact, this sliver of morning untouched by past or future. No lawyers, no signatures, no sharp-edged words, just breath. Light. Peace. A knock broke the silence. Soft but confident. Rhythmic. She set the cup down and opened the door without checking the peephole. Carla, wearing pajama pants, sunglasses, and holding a paper bag in one hand and a travel mug in the other. "Well?" she said, lifting the bag. "Did the prodigal daughter burn the couch yet? Or are we doing pancakes?" Sandra smiled. Stepped aside. "Come in." Carla breezed past her, gave the couch a sideways glance and spotted Lydia still sleeping. "I'll keep my voice down," she whispered, exaggerated, and set the bag on the counter. "They had lemon ricotta this morning. I figured you deserve to eat something that sounds fancier than it tastes." Sandra chuckled quietly. She poured Carla some coffee and joined her at the window. "You look rested," Carla said after a beat. "Didn't think you would." "I didn't sleep much," Sandra admitted. "But I didn't lie awake either." Carla took a sip. Progress. They watched the sun climb higher. The light had shifted now, catching the edges of the buildings and casting long golden stripes through the window across the floor. "You think she meant it?" Carla asked, nodding toward the couch. Sandra didn't answer right away. Her eyes stayed on the skyline. "I think she meant something," she said. "But meaning isn't change." Carla nodded slowly. "You gonna listen to that voicemail? Eventually. You think it's her?" "I don't think it matters," Sandra said softly. They stood quietly for another few minutes, side by side, like two sentinels watching the city take shape again. And then, barely louder than the hum of the fridge, Sandra spoke. "I figured it out." Carla turned to her. "What's that?" "The thing I forgot for so long," Sandra said, "that I get to choose how I live, not just survive, not scramble or patch it together, but choose." Carla smiled, nodded, didn't say anything else. The smell of lemon pancakes filled the air. On the couch, Lydia stirred again, rolled onto her side, and pulled the blanket tighter. Her breathing was uneven, fitful, but not angry. Not yet. Sandra didn't go to her, didn't rush. She simply picked up her coffee and took another sip, her shoulders relaxed, her gaze out the window. She felt it. Not triumph, not revenge, not even pride. Just peace. Quiet, earned, undeniable peace and freedom. From expectations, from guilt, from the version of motherhood that demanded sacrifice without end. Outside, the sun had fully risen now, the whole sky drenched in gold. Sandra stepped closer to the glass and whispered, mostly to herself, "I'm free."